This episode of the Disney Dish Podcast is sponsored by TouringPlans.com, where you can find trip planning tools and advice for Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and Universal Studios Orlando. Disney Dish listeners can subscribe with discount code DISH2013. That's DISH2013 to get 25% off a one-year subscription to TouringPlans.com. Check it out as soon as you're done listening. Thanks! Welcome back to another edition of the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish Podcast with Jim Hill. I am Len Testa, your host. And today we're going to be tackling a subject that one of our listeners had suggested regarding the history of Disney World's moderate hotels. And to tell that story fully, we need a man who is there. A man with not only his ears, but other parts of his body to the ground. That man is Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going?
It's not my fault I'm gravity challenged, right? I've been trying to get my spleen off the ground for quite some time now. We're getting a forklift.
So Jim, in talking about this episode, you had mentioned that we wanted to talk about the Disney moderates and the history of those. Obviously, it starts with Caribbean Beach Resort. But in order to really tell the story, we have to tell the story of how Disney World's hotels to begin with, right?
Yeah, and again, I apologize. I mean, you got to go with the James Michener route with this. I mean, you can't just start talking about Texas. You have to first start in the Jurassic period, where there were dinosaurs, which died, which made oil.
Exactly. Okay. All right, so we're going to get in our Wayback Machine. What year are we jumping to?
We are starting back in 1954 with Walt Disney.
Hold on. Okay, so listeners, if you're driving, brace yourself because we're going to go in the Wayback Machine. And if you're not driving, if you're a passenger, if you're on a subway listening to this, assume the crash position right now because here we go. We're going in the Wayback Machine. Ready? All the way back to 1954. All right, Jim. We're in 1954. What's going on?
Sorry.
I know, right? That was a tough segue. Go ahead. Everyone's a little disoriented when it first happens, but it'll wear off. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just waiting for my luggage.
It's in 2017. I'm so sorry. Look, it'll be here tomorrow latest.
Okay. All right. So, again, you have to understand that Disney always viewed itself as an entertainment company. I mean, think about it. It was a movie studio that made a theme park. And so hotels weren't really a thing that Disney did. In fact, that was the whole point of, Walt kind of turning to Jack Rather. And, the irony is Jack Rather wasn't in the hotel business either when Disney reached out. It was the guy who was producing The Lone Ranger for television. But it's like, look, I don't have the money to do this. You have the money to do this. Would you please build again, this is the important thing. Build a motel. Not a hotel, but build a motel.
Yeah, so they weren't thinking like mega resort.
No, not at all. But, going forward, it was obvious that, Jack was making money hand over fist at the hotel. And there was some grousing. But for Walt's point of view, that was in the rearview mirror. I mean, he'd made a handshake deal with his friend Jack Rather. And not only that, he'd given him the rights, a 99-year right to, if he wanted to build a Disney, a hotel anywhere in California with the Disney name on it, he had it. And again, the whole notion of, for Walt, it was like, I did that. That's behind me. Keep going forward. Right. And what's fascinating about this period in the company, the period from 54 to when Walt passes in December of 66, is some of the businesses he wandered into. I mean, for example, the Celebrity Sports Center in Denver. Walt and Roy went in with, and it's an amazing group of people. It's Jack Benny, Bing Crosby, George Burns, Charles Lawton, Burl Ives, Art Linkletter, and God, I love this, Spike Jones.
He's an animator. He's a
well, no, you're thinking Ward Kimball. This is Spike Jones, the guy who did the famous recording of The Fuhrer's Face. I mean, crazy band leader. But they all went in on this sports center in Denver, where it was like an Olympic-length pool and bowling alleys, and
it was like Planet Hollywood before Planet Hollywood.
Well, that's exactly. But it was one of these things where it's like, just Walt, that looked interesting to Walt, and he tried it on for a little bit, and was like, maybe, and the weird thing is, it wasn't making enough money. The other partners wanted out, and Walt eventually is like, well, this is kind of interesting. And kind of in the back of his mind, he knew that they were going to do Walt Disney World, and they were going to be in massive cash handling businesses and, people in a different part of the country. So he eventually assumed full control of it and just sort of kept it as like, I'm not sure what that is, but I want to hang on to that.
Okay.
And this actually becomes a really important place in Disney company history, because this is where a lot of the managers for Walt Disney World, particularly for the hotels and the restaurants, went to train. Because
inland.
At the Celebrity Sports Center.
Celebrity Sports. Okay, sorry.
Because the whole notion was like, well, Walt Disney World is going to be so different from Disneyland.
It's more of a resort. Got it. Okay.
That's it exactly. So let's send our people there. Anyway,
really. So when that's interesting. They didn't think that Disneyland was the right place to train people.
Well, no, because that's the thing. If you remember when Walt, you remember the famous Epcot movie from '66. Okay. What a lot of people don't understand is the map that Walt is standing in front of in that presentation. That's the 20-year master plan. And in fact, what he has on the wall behind him is the resort and at the city of Epcot at full build-out in 1991. But there was this incremental plan of, you got to walk before you can run. So in the case of Walt Disney World, for year one, for 1971, their plan... the total number of hotel rooms on site, because again, this was a huge risk. They didn't know if people were actually going to get on planes and go down there.
Sure.
Only 1,500 total hotel and motel rooms.
1,500
total.
How many were in Disneyland at the time?
Well, that's again, the Disneyland Hotel at this point is only, I want to say they didn't build the Bonita Tower till the early 70s. So you're only talking I think 800, 900 rooms on site. But of course, again, you have to understand the reason that drove Walt to Orlando were the number of cheap motels and hotels that had been built.
Right. So in the surrounding area, do you have any idea how many hotel rooms there?
Oh God, there were upwards of. Let's say I was doing the research for the book. Just in the Anaheim area, let alone wandering down. A harbor into Garden Grove, there were, a
few thousand?
12,000.
Okay, so just to put this in perspective, with Disneyland, Walt has 500 to 800 of his own hotel rooms, plus another 10 to 12,000, let's say. But
again, that's rather not Disney.
No, but Disneyland is big enough to support. This many, right? But but the Disney company is so unsure of Walt Disney World that they're essentially building 1/6, 1/8. The number of hotel. I can see where shorting yourself might lead to problems here.
Well, of course, the supreme irony of this is that you jump ahead to 92, and here's the Walt Disney Company of that period was ridiculously arrogant. I mean, here they build this amazing, theme park just outside of Paris, and not only that, include a bullet train that will take you, or a high-speed rail link from the
7 minutes.
Of Paris.
Yes, it's like 7 or 12 minutes.
6 huge hotels outside of a city that has 300 of the world's best hotels, and it's like, why can't we fill these rooms? It's because you were arrogant. So anyway. Okay, jumping backwards here. Okay, so again, this is an extremely cautious Walt Disney Company. They know how to build theme parks, and they are building this vacation kingdom. So they really don't they want to keep their vulnerability to a minimum. Financial exposure. Mm-hmm. So early on, they formed an agreement with U.S. Steel's realty division that they would build, and again, everyone knows about U.S. Steel building the modular rooms for the Poly and the Contemporary. But U.S. Steel was not only built, but was going to own those hotels and then lease them back to Disney.
Really?
And, so the whole notion was like, okay, you own those hotels, we own the theme park, and we'll lease them back to you. It was going to be a long-term lease. But the problem was that U.S. Steel, because, these are our hotels, and we'll get them done when we get them done. And that was the problem. They weren't going to get them completed in time for the opening of Walt Disney World in October of 71. So late winter, early spring of 71, Roy Disney sort of mans up and buys out U.S. Steel, and then just turns on the money fire hose to get those hotels open.
So was U.S. Steel just not interested in running the hotels by that point, or was Disney just, we need to get these done?
Well, the problem for U.S. Steel is they thought that these two hotels, the Polynesian and the Contemporary, were going to be models, that literally showrooms that they could bring potential clients in to show off the modular construction thing. And because from U.S. Steel's point of view, this is a model that could be used to build rooms for hospitals, rooms for schools, that sort of thing.
Any sort of thing where you need a lot of the same apartments, right?
That's it, exactly. And what ended up happening is
it's actually not a bad idea.
It is. But the problem is they found out as they were doing it, you had to build the factory that built the rooms had to be basically near wherever you were building these hotels.
Right.
And so, in fact, what's kind of interesting is if Disney property, do you know where like the kinder care, childcare?
Yeah, behind. Is it? Wait, so there's a. Sorry, I know there's a YMCA and stuff down by Osceola.
Well, this is actually out. To be honest, it's just beyond the golf course. I want to say the old Magnolia Osprey Ridge, sort of off to the right from that, kind of if you think to the east, and just above where the old Disney Institute, Saratoga Springs, is located. There's a complex of industrial buildings there and a kinder care off in one corner. This is actually where those modular rooms were built.
Really?
And they used to, drive them, across the dirt roads to the hotel and then winch them into place. But it was as they were building it, U.S. Steel learned, like, oh, crap, this isn't going to be, because, you can't drive these giant hotel rooms on normal roads. It has to be a private site. And just suddenly the business model for this just fell apart.
Well, yeah, when you have to start building the factory next, instead of building the factory in the rooms, it's easier to just build a hotel, right? Yeah.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah,
and
it stinks.
So that they kind of fell apart fairly quickly there. So Disney found itself in the hotel business by accident at Walt Disney World. And they really weren't ready. And again, they began throwing all these people into the Celebrity Sports Center to train to then be ready to run a hotel.
Sure.
Meanwhile, again, that because in the plan they had always wanted to have various rooms of they get price points.
Mm-hmm.
They had the campground set up, but they knew, and they had the theme resorts, and they had just sort of broken ground on the golf resort, but they knew they needed more. So they actually, again, because Disney didn't want to necessarily own hotels, they reached out to 4 of the giants of the motor inn business. Now, again, I love
the motor inn business. Yes.
The motor inn business, not motel, motor inn.
So when you say motor inn, it reminds me of large cars made entirely of steel with no safety equipment whatsoever, with parents smoking in the front seat with the windows up. Well, didn't everyone grow up like that, Jim? Didn't everyone grow up like that?
No, they did. In fact, Jay Leno used to do this wonderful piece of material about a car he used to call a Buick Roadmaster. It sat 12 for dinner.
Exactly.
And it's just like, and it was one of these things where it had a radio knob shaped like a dagger. If you were in a car accident, you fell for 10 seconds before you hit the dashboard. Please you get there. It's like, turn off the siren, Billy. He was driving a Roadmaster. They just hosed down the interior and sold it to somebody else. I mean, it was a very different era for cars.
It was.
But yes, the motor inn. So
the motor inns.
Disney gets in bed with Howard Johnson's Travelodge, the Dutch Inns of America, and Royal Inns of America, and all the 1,600 additional rooms for the moderate price. For guests looking for moderate, and again, just fascinating moment in Disney World history. The name of the street, that this was located on, again, you came off of I-4 and drove up 535 and turned onto Motor Inn Plaza.
Motor Inn Plaza.
And I'll tell you that name didn't hold very long, because by the time, a 1979 rolls around and they're getting things lined up for Epcot, that's Hotel Inn Plaza. That's it, and then eventually just became Hotel Plaza Road. They just found out.
So Hotel Plaza Boulevard is what used to be Motor Inn.
That's it exactly. They just
Really?
renamed the street because, again, and I guess it was more a case of guests just didn't want. Just I'm going to Disney World. I'm paying all this money. I don't want to stay at Motor Inn Plaza.
Yeah.
So it's like Hotel Plaza. All right.
Yeah, because people between 1955 and the mid 70s. Yeah, people's expectations of hotels had changed. Motor inns were not.
No. That's it exactly.
Which is kind of funny though, because if you think about, remember Universal's coming out with their Cabanas Resort next year, right? It's essentially harkening back to the Motor Inn days. So it's retro.
Well, no, that's it exactly. But now you're selling the nostalgia.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah. So but nobody wanted nostalgia back in the mid '70s.
No. Again, we were getting rid of our Roadmasters and getting our Nissans. All right. Anyway, we again back on the way back. We jump ahead here because again there was a plan. There was a methodical thought about how they're going to grow this resort. And again, I caution, this is the Disney World with Epcot the City plan. So for year 5. They were going to effectively have doubled the number of hotel rooms around what they referred to as the recreation complex. So you're talking 3,000 hotel room or 3,000 hotel/motel rooms. Meanwhile, Disney had envisioned out at the sort of the I-4-192 crossroads that they were going to build an entrance complex for Walt Disney World. Sure. And this is where you would board your monorail and ride through the construction site for Epcot. So
I-4 and 192.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So, I mean, again, just think about kind of where you come off of when you make the turn to go onto World Drive. At that point, you have this giant entrance complex where you can park and get on a monorail. But out by this was going to be 500 additional motel rooms. And they were actually, at this point, figuring that they would be starting on a couple of the residential communities that were part of the Walt Disney World complex. So those also included, that supposedly when the park opened 71, 72, they're going to have a 1,000 motel units kind of in the, again, Saratoga Springs, Lake Buena Vista area. And by year 5, they wanted to bump that out to 2,000. And again, just to sort of put this in perspective, like how explosive and bizarre the growth in Orlando was once they turned the key on Walt Disney World. When the park opened in October of 71, in the entire Orlando area, right, there were a total of 5,850 hotel rooms. That's it.
5,000.
Okay. By the end of 72, that had jumped to 22,000.
And U.S. Steel's looking at themselves going, could have just put it on 192. Could have put the factory there. That's funny. So the interesting thing about that, so the idea of putting a set of motel rooms, 500 motel rooms, off of I-4 where you visit Disney World, they've essentially got. I mean, that's what they have. They have Pop Century and the All-Star Resorts, depending on which exit you get off of I-4.
Well, that's
so it was sort of like I mean, obviously it's a vastly different scale than 500 hotel rooms, but that's what they did.
No, that's it. And in fact, that's what's so bizarre about this part of Disney history is that what they predicted ultimately came to be, but not in the way that, again, the guys with the slide rules in 1968 who were putting together the master plan here, that not exactly the way that they'd come out. And in fact, this is the other stat that just kills me, Len, that again, 22,700 hotel rooms in the Orlando area in 72, but there's another 14,000 about to begin construction at this point.
Wow, so it had gone from 5,000 to 20.
Yeah, and it was about to jump to 35, 36. Meanwhile, Disney is looking at this, and this is what's bizarre, all right? By 1973, okay.
So less than a year or so after, maybe a year and a half after opening. You take the combination of the campgrounds and the hotels, the occupancy rate on Disney property at this point is 96%. All right. There's no room at the inn.
No, okay. That's it exactly. So they now recognize, like, look, people prefer to stay within the vacation the vacation kingdom. They're finally getting ready to turn the key on the third themed resort, which was going to be the Asian, which was located. In fact, it did. Again, people can remember prior to construction of the Grand Floridian that you'd be on the monorail and you'd be going around World Showcase Lagoon and you'd look out at this perfectly square piece of property that jutted out into a Seven Seas Lagoon.
So it's a little known fact though, Jim, that the way that Florida's geology works, everything is a perfect square. That's why the streets are grids. Yeah, literally everything's 90 degree. I'm just kidding. Everything. It was just a feature of the geography of the particular land. The man-made stuff had nothing to do with it.
I learned so much doing this.
Some of it's actually true.
So anyway, they announced this in the 72 annual report that they're going to go forward with the Asian Resort. Now, mind you, it again still playing it safe, still being modest. The Asian Resort is only 500 hotel rooms, and it is going to be because it's on the monorail loop. It's going to be a premium. People are going to pay top dollar to stay there. 500
rooms. That's not even a DVC at the Grand Floridian these days, or maybe it might be barely. Yeah.
That's the crack up. So anyway, construction is planned for 1974, and they're going to start early. And again,
may have picked a bad year to choose to build that, but okay, go ahead.
Well, that's it exactly. Starting October of 73, you've got the Arab oil embargo, which continues on till March of 74, and by October of that year, the economy's a mess. Inflation's in the double digits. We've got stagflation, and of course, Gerald Ford, our great leader, his way of dealing with this is whip inflation.
Whip inflation now. The win buttons. Yeah.
That's right.
So I was born in '68, so I sort of vaguely remember
that's it exactly.
those things. But the funny thing to me from Disney's perspective is, they have the plans to build the resort in '73. Yep. They go through the oil crisis of '74, and I get that they're hesitant about it. But the thing that amazes me is that they assumed the bad times would last, right? Mm-hmm. That was the thing, because again, if you're going from 1,500 hotel rooms to 20,000 to 35,000, why would you not risk building 500? I mean, you're essentially adding 1/70th the capacity. It's a small risk.
Hindsight is always 20/20.
I know.
They believe that at least within the company, the problem was that Card Walker was 3,000 miles away. He's making these decisions sitting at a desk in California. And it's like, look, we're making a certain amount of money, but everything we add is a risk. And in fact, this is the language coming out of the 74 annual report. At the time of this writing, there is no way that the management of this company or any other can predict when the current inflationary spiral will be controlled or when an economic turnaround will occur.
I forgot about inflation. Yeah, but yeah, okay.
So this is a guy who just his natural inclination is to hit the brakes. Now, mind you, there is some incremental expansion going on. You get wings added to the Contemporary Resort, and remember that the Golf Resort actually came online in the same period in '73. But again, that was just 152 rooms. And to be honest, one of the reasons that people believe that Card Walker allowed that one to go forward is Card Walker liked to play golf. I mean. Okay. He wanted to play with, that the whole their Palmer Invitational down there every year. I mean, Card was a guy who, the guys in the animation building used to make a joke. It would be 3:00 in the afternoon, and said, all right, look at the window, and here's Card Walker walking out the front door of Disney Studios with, his loud plaid pants on and a golf bag. He's done for the day. He's going to go play golf. So, it was a strange period. And from 74 to early 80s, by the time the early 80s were around, Disney on property has just over 2,200 hotel rooms on property.
Wow, so they had 1,500, they built the other 500. So essentially they stagnated for, 6-8 years?
Oh, God, yeah. And meanwhile, and what's bizarre is that at the 10-year plan, if they've been following the original plan for Disney World, by year 10, they were supposed to have 4,000 hotel-motel rooms around the resort complex up toward, the Magic Kingdom. So they're
almost double. That was what
almost double.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the residential community out like Vista was supposed to have 2,500. The entrance complex was going to go from 500 to 2,500 motel units. And by this point, the jet port was supposed to be up. They were, again, that's the other thing people forget about. Celebration, where that was located, that was supposed to be Disney's international airport. This was where you flew in, and
instead of MCO.
there you go. So,
boy, you're talking about Magical Express. Jesus, that would have been.
no,
Not only are we bypassing the local Orlando transportation operations, we're bypassing the airport, the infrastructure.
now, all right. Now, to be fair to Card Walker, again, yeah, this is a guy who's hitting the brakes in regard to hotel development. But one of the reasons he's doing that is he knows that, one of the reasons they got that sweetheart deal from the Florida legislature and, basically, allowed, the Reedy Creek development deal to go through where Disney can call the shots as to what they want to do on property is that they were supposed to build Epcot.
Right, they're contractually obligated. Didn't they? Was there a dedeadline, right, for when they had to do it?
That
it depends on what you mean by deadline and was.
No, that's it exactly. I'm sure Bill Clinton very early on.
What do you mean by Epcot? It is. Yeah.
So it was one of these things where, and we won't go into the whole Epcot, the various iterations of Epcot. Let's just talk about the actual construction of it. It's a massive project. Disney knew that they were going to need some help doing this. So they reached out to the Tishman Group. Now, these are the guys who built the World Trade Center. Okay. And the thinking in-house at Disney, and that was sort of the big construction project of the mid-'70s that just like, look, if these guys can build two giant towers in the middle of New York, they can handle building this thing in the middle of a swamp in Florida. And Tishman agreed to tackle the job, but he wanted a quid pro quo with the understanding that once work was complete, he would then be allowed to build what was then supposed to be the largest hotel in all of Florida.
Wow.
This was going to be the 1,500-room Sheraton Orlando. And there was going to be yet another property associated with this, the Holiday Inn Crowne Plaza. And they were both going to be in Hotel Plaza. So, he was going to come in and join the four hotels that were there. But this is the thing. There was this handshake deal between Card Walker and John Tishman with, y'all do Epcot, you give me this hotel. And the unsaid understanding was that there would then be a moratorium for upwards of about 10 years.
Really?
Of no more hotel building. It meant that the Tishman Group, once Epcot opened, they could max out the profits they could get out of that property, and
So they essentially guaranteed them not a monopoly, but
pretty damn close. Okay.
Wow.
All right. Anyway, so Tishman, but again, that's kind of handshake. Nobody likes to talk about that. Okay. Ground breaks on Epcot, October 23rd, 1979, and this is a massive project, Len. It takes 3 years. There are 4,000 construction workers, 24 prime contractors, 500 subcontractors. All of this work to turn 300 square acres of sludge. In fact, that's the other thing about honestly could not have picked a worse site on Disney property to build this thing. That just at the 40th anniversary of Epcot presentation last year that D23 did, Marty Sklar was talking about, the monorail that goes around the interior of the theme park.
Yeah, it's a great effect.
It is, but next time you're in the park, take a look at the span of the monorail that kind of goes over that little inlet kind of a thing.
The pond thing by the Odyssey around there.
Yeah. And, actually, other side over by Imagination.
Okay. Yeah.
They lost 7 different support pilings.
What, they just sunk into the ground?
It's like they would just go to set up the track and put one in, and it would just go and go and go. And, it took them months to find the place that would actually hold the piling.
Wow.
We lost so much equipment in that corner, and it's like, why we picked this spot? But, again, it was going by Walt said you build the city in the center of the property. So we built Epcot in the center of the property. But because of situations just like that, Epcot's construction costs kept creeping up. Project initially budgeted for $400 million, eventually rolls to $800 million. And by the time they get done, it's $1.2 billion. Now, to be fair here, that I was just talking with somebody this week, and they just said, look, if you want to talk about why things got out of control, it was World Showcase.
Really?
Future World was all major American corporations who were very, it's like they were good about, all right, how much money okay, that's you got your full amount. But when you got to World Showcase, you got to remember initially that there were supposed to be 30 countries around the lagoon, and suddenly, it's Disney's going out. They can't get 30 commitments, so they end up with 8 or 9. And so what ends up happening is that they just, they realize that when you just put 8 or 9 countries around, that they look really sparse and alone when they're not, really close together. And so what initially started off as sort of standalone buildings and like one attraction and one restaurant suddenly began mutating into, well, everything kind of has to be like Liberty Square. It has to be a standalone land.
Mm-hmm.
And, these kind of bare bones plans kept getting added to. And meanwhile, in most of these cases, it's not the country itself that's paying for the, it's a company based in the country. And, they're like, look, you said this price point. This is now double that price point. I can't do that. I can't, this makes no sense to us, which is why when you think about how Japan was supposed to open with the Meet the World show, and Germany was supposed to have its Rhine boat ride, and Italy was supposed to have its wonderful romantic canal boat.
Gondola, yeah.
Yeah, these all went from being opening day attractions to, okay, we'll do that phase 2, and they never happen. And even in the case of things that did get built, like the Mexico River of Time thing,
mm-hmm.
that got its budget cut by a third. If that ride seems short and abrupt, there's a reason. There were 2 more rooms you were supposed to float through that just disappeared out of the plan as they were building it.
Yeah, the effects get progressively more 2D and paint oriented rather than animatronics oriented. The farther you get into the ride.
But even so, here's Disney's opening Epcot, and they believe that this is really going to turn things around. This is really going to make things happen. And so here you have the speech by Dick Nunes, and this is spring of '82. We're 6 months out from the opening, and this is where it gets interesting because you've got Karen Walker, who's had this handshake deal with John Tishman
mm-hmm.
about Disney's not going to build any hotels. And yet, listen to this speech. All right, Karen estimates is that this area, the Central Florida area, is now 15,000 to 19,000 hotel rooms short. We're worried about that. So right now, we plan on expanding the Polynesian, the Golf Resort, and the Walt Disney World Village Resort area. So okay, so the Tishman hotels, we're going to be factoring into this, but we also have in design 3 hotels. The Mediterranean will be located between the Ticket and Transportation System and the Contemporary Hotel. The Cypress Point Lodge, which eventually, as you know, became Wilderness Lodge, will be west of River Country in Fort Wilderness and will be themed as a Western hotel. It will include log cabins along Bay Lake. The third, the Grand Floridian, will build at the Old Asian site near the existing Polynesian Village Resort. It'll be a replica of the great Florida hotels of the early 1890s.
Really?
Yeah. So again, that's the what
when,
I love.
When is this?
This is spring of '82. So, and that's what's fascinating about this story. Everyone has always assumed that the Grand Flow was something that Michael Eisner.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah.
No, here is Dick Nunes, president of the Walt Disney World at this time, announcing that we've designed, it's a great replica hotel, and our creative people have come up with an absolutely beautiful design.
Huh? So this was '82, so it opened 6 years later.
Yep.
'88.
So,
huh?
All right. Anyway, we jump ahead here. In addition, we have some dreams for the Walt Disney World Village. From the Empress Lily restaurant, we're going into a New Orleans street, and you'll walk right into a beautiful New Orleans hotel. This is where it gets interesting. There's your moderate, Len. The first Disney.
It was going to be, huh?
The Port Orleans Dixie Landings complex was originally supposed to be built there, kind of where we now have Disney West Side. Pleasure Island. And
so that's where Fulton's came in. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So because Fulton's was the Empress Lily, right?
Yep, that's it exactly. So what fascinates me about that story is here's Dick Nunes saying this, but we know that Cart Walker's made this deal with Tishman.
Yeah, there's some tension there.
Yeah, so it's like, what's this he was going to announce that would be built after the Tishman had recovered his money. Anyway, all right, jumping ahead, Epcot opens October of 1982, gets decent reviews, but by '83 attendance is already eroding, and because the company had financially overextended itself with the construction of Epcot and at the same time getting the Disney Channel on the edge. suddenly it's vulnerable to green mailers, and you've got Ivan Boesky making runs at the company. You've got Saul Steinberg, kidding Disney, threatening the company, and Roy Disney and Stanley Gold are just disgusted with what's going on. I mean, to kind of put this in perspective, Glenn, do you want to know the last hit film that Disney had before this all went down?
Was it the cinematic masterpiece Apple Dumpling Gang?
5 years further back, The Love Bug, 1969.
Wow.
That was the last thing they could legitimately call a hit by Hollywood standards. So Stanley and Roy get in bed with the Bass brothers, who then become the company's White Knights. They managed to get Michael Eisner and Frank Wells installed as CEO and president. But here's the thing. The Bass brothers, right out of the back, it's like, look, you have to. We've got to get more money. We've made this huge investment in the company. We want you to do more development at Walt Disney World. And just to kind of put this in perspective, at that point in Disney company history, only 10% of the land in Florida had been developed. And this is after Epcot opens and the shopping village is up and running. But, so 90% of it is still wide open. So Eisner turns around, forms the Disney Development Company, which is going to be the part of the company that develops real estate. And Eisner, is going over the books, checking everything. And one of the things that Disney is losing, because it's all happening off property, is convention business. So, he announces that they're going to build this giant convention-shaped, or convention-based hotel near Epcot. And John Tishman, just like, wait a minute.
Gentlemen. I believe we have a deal.
So
so this is 84. When was the deal with Tishman made?
Tishman was made in 79.
Oh, right. so like 5 years later?
Yeah, 5 years later, and it's like, wait a minute, we spent all this money, we had all our people in the sweltering heat of Florida building your damn park, and it's time that you make good. More to the point, we have the that you can't do this. And so he turns around and sues Disney for $371 million. And there's kind of
that's back when $371 million was real money. Now it's actually less than the Powerball lottery. But go ahead. I was just looking at it going, I can pay you, or I could just buy 100 million tickets and call it even.
There we go.
All right. Okay.
What ends up happening is that, Eisner, goes into a room with John Tishman, and they kind of hash it out. And it's like, all right, how about this? I want a convention hotel, and but I also want the rights to actually. We have to start building hotels on property. So what if you build the convention hotel right next to the theme park that you built? And for Tishman, this is a win-win. I mean, they get to build, in addition to the Crown Plaza and the Sheraton out on Hotel Plaza Drive, they get to build these giant convention center complex right next to Epcot. It's like, well, yeah, sure, but with the understanding that this lawsuit goes away, and once we do this, you have no right. These are the only two hotels beyond the two you've built down in Hotel Inn Plaza.
So they've essentially torn up the old contract and rewritten it.
But at the same time, Tishman is a smart guy. He owns those buildings outright. He has a 99-year lease on the land. And Disney, they're not idiots either. I mean, they got, they get a share of the hotel's revenues. And
Sure.
This was actually the beginning of Eisner, the architect patron, because he made part of the deal that Disney had a say on the design and the architecture in both the interior and the exterior of that building. So that, once that deal was in place and everybody was happy, then began the most remarkable period in Disney resort history. You then saw a $1 billion expansion of, at Walt Disney World, and all of that money, every dollar of it, went into the construction of new on-site hotels.
Wow. Okay, so I think that's a good place to stop this particular one. We'll pick up with the construction of the hotels next.
No, absolutely. But just a quick note here, though, that the irony is that if they had stuck with the original plan for Walt Disney World, by year 20, so we're talking 1991, there would have been 6,000 hotel rooms.
6,000.
6,000 up by the resort complex. Epcot, the city, at this point is supposed to have 10,000 employees. There's supposed to be 4,000 hotel rooms inside of the city, along with 7,500 residential units. And the additional outside residential community, sort of the suburbs of Epcot,
Yep.
16,500 residents, 3,000 motel room units out there. And again, just this is what fascinates me about what fell off the table. The Disney Industrial Park. And this is the thing that became really became the bone of contention with the state of Florida. It's like, where are the good paying jobs? There was 20,000 employees working out there. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of, there's tens of thousands of employees who work on Disney property, but a lot of them are minimum wage.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess what cracks me up is you of all people would, given, how well wired you are into how many rooms there are actually on property, but the total hotel rooms by 91 were supposed to have been, on Disney property was supposed to have been 18,500. I mean, for example, by this point, the jetport is fully operational, and there's 500 motel rooms out there for people who are just looking for a place to crash before they get out early in the morning to take their flight.
Wow.
But yeah,
that's interesting. With the industrial park, because those are manufacturing jobs, which typically pay more than service sector jobs.
No, that's it.
Well, I can see how they're upset. Yeah.
So anyway, next time, again, I'm sorry, we had to go through the whole Jurassic history of Walt Disney, but next time we get to the moderates, and what's fascinating is you really can't tell the story of the moderates at Walt Disney without getting into things like the Grand Flow, because they were kind of built in the same time.
I didn't know that about the Grand Floridian. I really thought that was an Eisner baby.
No, but that's the fascinating part of the actual history of this company. If you dig down, it's like that's absolutely positively not your idea. You got it from somebody else. So
fantastic. All right, Jim. Well, thanks very much for enlightening us on that. I can't wait for to hear about the history of the moderates, because that'll be fantastic.
Coming soon.
All right, for Jim Hill, this is Len Testa. You've been listening to the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. Please go back onto iTunes and rate our podcast and let us know what you'd like to hear next. For Jim, this is Len. We will see you on the next show.
Take care, guys.